Okay, guys, another episode has been cleared for public release, but just barely. And you know what that means. That means I'm going to keep this right on the edge of what's allowed. But that's where this show lives. So today I want to talk to you about firm fixed price. Not because fixed price is anything new. It's not. Fixed price contracts have been around forever. Contractors have priced them, survived them, performed them, loved them, hated them, and occasionally stared at their profit reports like it was an insult to their family. But now something has changed. The pressure around fixed price is getting louder. The government wants more cost certainty, more performance accountabilities, and more predictable outcomes. And a lot less of, well, we'll see what it costs when we get there. And contractors need to pay close attention because fixed price is not just a contract type. It is a risk transfer. Let me say that again. Fixed price is not just a contract type. It is a transfer of risk. And if you don't understand what risk is being transferred, then you're not negotiating. You are accepting exposure with a signature block. That is, or could be, a big problem for you. Now, a lot of contractors hear fixed price and think, oh, well, we know this work. We can price it. We're going to be fine. Maybe. Maybe you will be fine. Or maybe you're about to take a bunch of cost-type habits like flexible performance assumptions, informal customer direction, ODC and travel assumptions with routine extensions, and shove all of that into a contract structure that does not care how hard you try. Because fixed price rewards discipline, and it punishes optimism.
This broadcast has been cleared for public release, but just barely.
Broadcasting from deep inside the Federal Acquisition Labyrinth, this is the GovCon Show. This show is for acquisition pros, wannabe pros, and procurement insiders who need a place to unpack the chaos. We speak fluent contracting and sarcasm. No clearance required. This is the GovCon Show. And away we go!
Welcome back to the GovCon Show, broadcasting from deep inside the Federal Acquisition Labyrinth, where spreadsheets are polished, the narratives are creative, and the conclusion was apparently decided 3 meetings ago. This is the show where contracting professionals say the quiet part out loud. We break down the reality behind federal contracting, the responsibilities, the decisions that actually matter. And we do it all with no filters, just real conversations from the front lines. I want to be clear right away. This is not a panic, but it is pressure, and pressure matters. When agencies are pushed towards fixed price and performance-based contracting, contractors need to understand what that actually means. It does not mean that every cost-type contract magically turns into fixed price by Friday. That's not how this works. But it does mean contractors should expect more questions. Things like, can this be restructured? Can this be converted? Can we shift more risk to outcomes? Can we make the price more predictable? And when those questions starts coming, the wrong answer for you is, sure, we can probably do that. No, do not say that. That is not an answer. That is how your profit margins walk head on into traffic. The better answer you should give is, maybe, but first we need to understand the risk. That's the grown-up answer. Now, here is what makes this shift especially dangerous. Contractors have been trained for a completely different world. For years, and in some cases decades, contractors have worked hard to become eligible for cost reimbursement work to get an approved accounting system. They've perfected their labor charging disciplines. They have built sometimes very complex indirect rate structures in order to keep their costs down. They have honed their cost tracking capabilities. And that was the world that many contractors were trying to enter. And for many small businesses, especially subcontractors, their entire universe has been shaped by prime contractors performing under cost reimbursable contracts. Oh, they know T&M. And they know labor hour contracts. They know the government or the prime puts money on their contract just ahead of the need. That's the environment they grew up in. So when somebody says fixed price is easier, and administratively maybe it can look easier, but operationally, fixed price is much less forgiving because now all those travel costs and materials and ODCs, all those labor and schedule assumptions, they're all risk. And they don't just float along as the need arises. They need to be tied to the requirement. They need to be priced. They need to be included in the total deal. And in an uncertain economy, that's not simple to do. Travel costs move, material costs increase, suppliers change their prices, and retention of qualified staffing becomes much more expensive. But under fixed price, your cost experience doesn't automatically reopen the price. That's this whole point. So if your company is used to saying, well, we'll handle travel when the government funds it, or we'll buy materials when they're needed, fixed price is going to be a rude awakening in business casual for you, because fixed price asks a much harder question. Did you price it before you promised it? And if you didn't, that cost may now be coming out of your profits. That's not a paperwork change. That's a business model change. One of the most dangerous things a contractor can say right now is, we've been doing this work for 20 years. That sounds strong, and it may be true, but it's not enough. Knowing the work is not the same as being ready to carry the risk. Under cost-type work, the contractor may have more flexibility when requirements shift and assumptions change, or the customer needs more support. Under fixed price, the conversation changes. The price is the price. The contractor owns more of the cost risk. If the scope is unclear, that's an issue for the contractor. If the labor mix is wrong, another issue for the contractor. If the customer dependencies are not protected, that matters. And if your subcontractor terms are misaligned, that's an issue for the prime. If acceptance criteria are vague, that's an issue for the contractor. And if your program keeps saying yes to quick little customer requests, congratulations. You've just opened a drain on your profit pool, but with a friendly smile. Those are some of the real dangers that go hand in hand with a conversion to firm fixed price. Companies assume historical familiarity equals their fixed price readiness, and it doesn't. Your past performance proves you've done the work, but it does not prove that you've priced the risk correctly. Those two things are not the same. You see, fixed price hates ambiguities. It may tolerate it for a little, but fixed price does not forgive ambiguity forever. And to be brutally honest, this is where contractors just have to face the facts. If the statement of work is vague, then fixed price is very dangerous. If the deliverables are unclear, guess what? Fixed price is very dangerous. And if your acceptance criteria are subjective, then the fact is that a fixed price agreement is very dangerous. And if your customer controls key information like access to information, inputs, approvals, then you have to accept that fixed price agreements are very dangerous. Because under fixed price, ambiguity does not disappear. It waits. It waits until the customer says, well, we thought that was all included. Or the subcontractor says, well, that's not in our price. And then everyone wants to know, how did this happen? Well, it happened because you priced uncertainty like it was certainty. Don't do that. That's how contracts become expensive learning experiences. Now let's talk about scope, because scope is where fixed price contracts either live responsibly or die loudly. Scope cannot be, general support, provide general support. Scope cannot be, support the customer whatever the customer needs are. No, that kind of language may survive in a softer environment for a while. But under fixed price, vague scope becomes a business weapon, and it is usually pointed at the contractor. You need to know what's included and excluded. You need to know what customer responsibilities exist. You need to know what changes trigger a modification to the contract. You need to know when your team must stop, evaluate, and say, let's verify. We're thinking that maybe that's outside of the deal. And yeah, that's a dangerous sentence, and it makes people uncomfortable. But that's good. It should, because the alternative is quietly performing work that you never priced, never negotiated, and you never agreed to. That is not customer service. That's a donation of your profits. And I don't recommend any business running a charitable scope creep. Another area you've got to understand is the period of performance. Under cost-type work or T&M environments, extensions feel rather routine, not painless, and rather sort of automatic. The customer needs more time, the period of performance gets extended. If there's been an adjustment to some funding, travel gets added and labor continues on. But fixed price doesn't treat time in the same way. If the end date moves, then somebody's got to pay for that time. When maybe the government pays through a modification. Maybe the contractor submits a proposal. Or maybe the contractor absorbs the additional effort inside the same old firm fixed price. And that's where companies get hurt, because missed deliverables under fixed price can trigger more than schedule embarrassment. It can trigger acceptance issues, payment delays, customer dissatisfaction, and less than satisfactory CPAR ratings. One late report can affect the next deliverable. One missed milestone can affect the next acceptance event. And one unresolved delay can turn into an avalanche. Under cost type, the pain may be manageable. Under fixed price, the same behavior can start eating profits, because time is not just time anymore. Time is a priced risk. Now we need to talk about the performance-based contracting. Performance metrics sound wonderful. Everyone loves performance. Nobody wants non-performance. That'd be kind of weird, wouldn't it? But performance metrics need to be clear, measurable, and tied to things the contractor can actually control. Otherwise, you're not accepting accountability. You're accepting a guessing game with consequences. If a metric depends on government-furnished information or access to facilities or customer response times or third-party systems, then that dependency needs to be addressed. Do not accept responsibility for outcomes that you can't control unless the contract gives you protections when those dependencies fail. That's not being difficult. That is basic survival. A performance metric should answer what is being measured, how is it measured, who is measuring it, when is it measured, what counts as a success or a failure, and what happens if the customer causes the delay? What happens if conditions or assumptions change? And if those answers are fuzzy, then the metric's not ready. It may look professional and sound very outcome-driven, and it may appear on a very confident PowerPoint. But if it cannot be administered clearly, it's not a metric. It's a future argument wearing a dashboard. And it's important to note that subcontractors are going to feel these pains too, and they need to listen closely to the prime. If the government shifts more risk into the prime, then the prime is going to look downstream. That means subcontractors are going to feel this hard. Primes are going to want fixed price subcontractors, tighter deliveries, stronger acceptance language, and probably more flow downs with less flexibility. And all of that may be appropriate, but only if it's done deliberately. If a prime accepts fixed price risk from the government, but leaves the subcontractors under weak or mismatched or vague open-ended terms, then the prime owns that loss. But if the subcontractor accepts fixed priced obligations without fully understanding the total prime, then the subcontractor may be accepting risk that it cannot control. That is not negotiation. That's trust falling right into traffic. The prime contract and the subcontractor structure need to be cohesive and aligned. The scope needs to align. Acceptance and change procedures need to be consistent. Performance metrics and pricing assumptions all need to be understood and in alignment. Because if the prime's risk and the subcontractor's risk don't match, that difference becomes a dispute just waiting to happen. And disputes are no more than just failed assumptions with lawyers. And that's the cold part. Fixed price does not care if everyone had good intentions. Fixed price only says you agreed to the price. Cold little sentence there. So what should contractors do before they say yes? Well, slow down. Slow down just long enough to test the risk. Not dramatically, not a full stop. Just long enough to stop confusing urgency with readiness. Ask yourself, is the scope mature? Are the assumptions written? Is the period of performance realistic? Are the performance metrics measurable and within your control? And does your team know what to do when the customer asks for more, different, or faster? Just this one time. That's the conversation you've got to be able to walk into any conversion discussion with a clear understanding of. You need to know what you can accept, but more importantly, you need to know what you should not accept. Now, to assist our clients that are facing these issues, we've built a fixed price conversion risk assessment because we know that before you agree to convert, restructure, or renegotiate, or accept the fixed price risk, you need to know where that exposure is hiding. And the assessment looks at those things that actually matter, things like scope maturity, historical cost stability, customer dependencies, and subcontractor alignment, and change control discipline. Because fixed price conversion is not just a pricing exercise. It's a business risk decision. And if your company is being asked to move cost type T&M or labor hour work into a fixed price structure, you should not be guessing. You should be assessing. To do that, I encourage you, go to our website at govconadvisorygroup.com. Look for the fixed price conversion risk assessment. It's free. Try it. Before you accept the risk, understand the risk. That is this whole point. Let me bring this one home. Fixed price is coming with more force. Maybe not everywhere, maybe not all at once, maybe not on every contract, but the pressure has changed. And smart contractors should not wait until they're sitting across from the government being asked to convert work they have performed for years before they start thinking about what fixed price really means. Because fixed price is not just a contract type. It changes who carries the pain. So don't treat it like paperwork. Don't treat it like the same old work with a different contract label slapped on the front of it. That's how companies get hurt. The government may want cost certainty, and that's fair enough. But contractors need risk clarity. So before you say yes, know what you're accepting. Before you convert it, know whether the work is actually ready. And before you convince yourself, we've done this for years, remember, knowing the work is not the same thing as carrying all the risk. Run that conversion risk assessment, because fixed price rewards discipline and it punishes optimism. All right, guys, that's it. I'm getting off of the soapbox. But do me a favor. If this episode gave you something to think about, if you liked it, share it with somebody in government work that needs to hear it. And then subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. All right, this has been the GovCon Show. And yep, this one was cleared for public release. Granted, just barely.
If today's episode sounded a little too familiar, that's probably a sign. Until next time, keep your files tight, your logic tighter. Remember, if your compliance approach is built on checking boxes, you're building risk. We'll see you next time on the GovCon Show.
This broadcast has been cleared for public release, but just barely.